Good morning and greetings from Houston. My name is George Edwards, and I'm the past president of the Harvard Business School Club of Houston and a proud member of the Asia Society Texas Center. We are honored to partner on today's program with the Asia Society Texas Center located here in Houston and our colleagues at the Asia Society in India. In addition to viewers from different cities in the US, we have others who have logged in to watch this program from several different parts of the world, including Mumbai, Hong Kong, London, Zurich, and Beijing. This speaks to the international presence and prestige of our outstanding guest speaker and the superb organization Jai represents. We are privileged to welcome Jai, who is the global CEO of UPL Limited. He is a well-recognized leader in the agricultural industry with over 30 years of experience. UPL is focused on strengthening food security in over 130 countries by offering world-class technologies and solutions for sustainable agricultural production. Under Jai's leadership, UPL is one of the fastest growing ag input companies in the world. He has driven the transformation of UPL from a largely domestic Indian player to a truly international organization. Frankly, the growing number of extreme weather-related disasters has reduced the yields of major crops, raising questions about how to make farming practices more sustainable in a rapidly evolving world. Today's OpenAg conversation will focus on technology and global food security. Jai will share his views on how innovative technology can help increase farming sustainability and how investments in new technologies can impact worldwide food systems. Moderating the program is my good friend Marty Goosen, Vice Chairman of the JP Morgan Private Bank. He also serves as Vice Chairman of the Board of the Asia Society Texas Center and really a valued member of the Harvard Business School Club of Houston Advisory Board. Following the program, we will be taking some viewer questions, so please share your questions via the Zoom comment box. We hope you enjoy today's program, and now I turn it over to Marty.
Thank you, George. That's a fantastic introduction. I appreciate it very much, and I also appreciate your leadership at the Harvard Business School Club here in Houston. As you noted, we have hopefully listeners from all over the world, members of the Asia Society Texas Center, the Harvard Business School Club here in Houston, and also the Asia Society in India. And we hope all of you will be interested in this, I think, critical, forward-looking topic. We have true challenges. We focus on climate change. It seems to be the topic of the day, among other things, but it's an extremely important topic. But frankly, the impact of climate change, for example, on the food supply to feed our billions of souls on the earth is going to be a very important issue for us for decades to come and for those who come behind us. And so I think having Jai Shroff with us today is a unique opportunity. And as George said, Jai is a leader in global agribusiness. It may be based in India, but by no means is it in solely Indian company. If anything, it is today now more international than Indian. So we're going to get into, I hope, a very thoughtful conversation with Jai about the key issues around food security, sustainability, and these types of global issues. Let me start though, Jay, by welcoming you. Thank you so much for coming. I see that you're not in Bombay. I guess you told me you're on a little vacation, but we sincerely appreciate you taking time out of your break here to join us. Thank you.
No, thanks, Marty. Pleasure to be here.
Great. And hopefully we're gonna get into a very interesting conversation. I want us to run through three basic topics, if you don't mind. One of them would be Jai Shroff. Jai Shroff, the person, Jai Shroff, the leader of UPL, and Jai Shroff, the person that is, if you will, proselytizing the importance of food sustainability and food issues for the global population. And then we'll talk more specifically about UPL and UPL's role, the background of UPL and where UPL is going into the future. And then, of course, I do want to talk about the future and all these things that we're talking about, climate change and population growth and things. So those are the three topics I've lined up in terms of just trying to organize our conversation. And I want to remind what George just said. Please, if you have any questions as you go along, start right now. Put them in the chat box. I'll get those questions and we'll be able to filter them into the conversation either at the end or as we move along. It doesn't make any difference. In any case, we hope to spend another 45, 50 minutes with you, Jay, in a really interesting conversation. So let's start with your background. You grew up in Mumbai, two successful business people. We talked about him just a second ago. Your father is nearly 90, your mother's in her 80s. But they started a company called United Phosphorus Limited. What was that all about? Why did they start that company?
Sure. No, pleasure. No, it was, we come from a business family, and my father worked with his uncles. His father passed away really early. He was a bit of an, I would say, he was a bit of an adventurer. And during his 20s, he actually went to the UK, set up a plant to manufacture chemicals in the UK as part of the bigger family business. He eventually came back in probably in the mid 60s and started UPL in 69, sort of separating from the existing family business and started off UPL. He wanted to take a lot more risk, which the family didn't want to, so he spun out, started a small business, and built UPL with basically being a technologist, looking at opportunities. There was a great arbitrage in those days. The chemical industry existed in Europe and in US. Rest of the world was completely dependent on chemicals being imported from these countries. So being a foreign exchange starved country in the 60s and 70s, it was pretty easy to grow because the government encouraged a lot of investment. There was huge import duty protection. So if you could make any chemicals, you could actually make a reasonable amount of money and grow the company. And I think then we had the first oil shock, and that's when the business really grew and built into very specialized chemicals, which he prided himself in. My father was very proud of his technology and his teams, and he built a whole portfolio of chemicals for the Indian market, primarily focusing on the needs of the Indian market. And then in the 80s, we started to grow, went backward, integrating, reducing our dependence on imports for raw materials, and that was the beginning of also a lot more investment in the chemical industry. So the industry as such was growing. It created an ecosystem where you could buy equipment, you could get trained manpower, chemical engineers, etc., to build a business. And we focused much more on agrochemicals and agriculture in the 80s. Started a distribution business primarily focused in India. Around the time in the 80s, mid 80s, as being part of family business, the culture was You go to university in the morning, early morning. You spend half the day in the office because university started um, early morning, and you were free in the afternoon. You went to the office, you sat there, and you listened to your father do business, and you learned.
So
That was
you got a degree in chemicals at University of Mumbai, right? So this is what you were
That's
doing.
right.
You were in a work study program. It sounds to me like a family derived work study program where you were studying in the morning and working in the afternoon. Relatively typical Indian situation would be my guess.
Absolutely. Yes, and it was very challenging. It was very, you saw real challenges. You saw crises. You saw, financial issues. You saw, defaults. You saw, boom times, and this was all in 5 years while you're doing there. So there's a lot of subconscious learning, and I think that really helped me. And then obviously trying to get my own space in the business. My father was really positive. He doesn't see risk like other people. And whenever I wanted to do something, he encouraged me. Said it didn't work when I tried it, but go ahead, try your best. And so we built a global business out of that, and we started to trade internationally. Very early on, I realized that the Indian market was much smaller than the international market. So we started to look at the US and other markets around Europe and Africa, and started to really understand that the opportunity for our portfolio of technologies and products was global and not India. And then we went on to buy a lot of businesses. We've done 50 or so acquisitions over the last 25 years to build out a whole global platform.
So let me just interrupt for
I
a second.
grew up.
Let me just interrupt for a second. So you took over as CEO in 2000. You took over in 2007 as CEO, right? As the head of the business. What was that transition like?
Yeah, so while I took over, in a family business, truly there's never clear definitions. I always had to choose my own title. While nobody, there was no such thing as HR in a family business. You go there, and I would say, I think I should be focusing on the international business. So you say I would change my designation manager international business, and then I would go for to buy a business somewhere in Europe or in the US, and they would say, but your international business, why are you buying companies? So I would say, change my title, and so it was ongoing. So as far as the international business, I was always running that because I started it, I founded it in the business, and then really took over as CEO formally in the 2000s. But the challenge was, when we really got excited about our business in the 90s, we realized that the arbitrage of manufacturing in India, the cost of just doing business in India, producing in India, was so much lower than in other parts of the world, and we were so much more competitive. We made a business plan to really grow our business. That was prior to the China market really booming, because if you see what happened, the whole chemical industry is about what, 4.5 trillion. And China didn't exist, India didn't exist, and China today is about 1.3 trillion. So they really grew a lot, and the opportunity, and they took that vacuum which existed. And India actually did pretty well, but not as well as they could have if the government policies were okay, and the investment environment was better. But generally speaking, the whole boom from in the 90s and 2000s, we were able to transition. And when Chinese industry became very competitive, we had to change our business model a number of times. We went from supplying B2B businesses more to B2C businesses, trying to access to farmers in US, distributors in Brazil, in Argentina, in Europe, etc. And we had to transition the business to stay competitive. And that was so transition from being a B2B business, transition from being B2C. And then in the 2000s, we really started focusing on technology, patents, IP, and developing differentiated products, understanding
And
the challenges being
branding too, right? You focused on
absolutely.
branding too. So what does that mean
That's
in
right.
agriculture? What does branding mean in agriculture?
Branding means how do you really build a brand. Farmers as such, if you look at farmers are actually very lonely, right? You plant your seed, you wait for your crops, you wait 6 months in fruit, in other crops you even have to, in sugarcane you can have to wait 18 months, and they are very risk averse, so they're not going to use a brand which they don't know. So really, if you go and tell a farmer, use my product, he'll use it on probably half an acre, right? He won't use it on his whole farm. So once you have a trusted brand and he trusts one of your products, it's much easier for him to accept your product. So it's very important in our industry because you need to have the trust
And now you're talking
of the
about brand,
customer.
in this case, products. You're talking about seeds, for example, right? You're talking about what they're putting in the ground to ensure that they get the right outcome, the right productivity, the right yield, and all these things. So what you're talking about is branding the seed technology that you created so that these products are successful for the farmer. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. And basically it has to have you have to have trust, and that comes with familiarity of brand. So we transform the whole business into from a B2B business to B2C, and today almost 100% of our business is branded.
That's fantastic. When we talk about seeds, what's interesting is you actually partnered through a company called Adventa, which I think you own, right? Adventa Seeds. And you're partnering in a state-of-the-art biotechnology center here in Texas at Texas A&M at College Station. Can you talk a little bit about that and what research means in the products that you provide?
Absolutely. No, it was, we had biotech, agriculture biotech centers all over the world. We had ag tech centers in Australia, Argentina, in India, and what we realized that the US has much better talent. The cost of operations in the US, the regulatory environment is so much easier, and you get so much more support. I mean, unfortunately, in India, the regulatory environment for doing any kind of research in ag, in seeds, in technology, in biotechnology, is very restricted, and it just slows you down. So we had a lot of discussion internally to actually move all our technology development centers to a central location within College Station. And we're really happy with that because we get really good talent. We get the latest understanding of technology, and we develop non-genetically modified weed resistance, insect resistance. We use drones and other technology to actually segregate seeds. And normally, if you're doing seed breeding, it can take you up to 7 to 8 years to develop a new seed variety. With using technology and what we're doing, we're able to do it in 3 to 4 years. And each generation of seeds increases yield by at least 5 to 10%. So when we are talking about improvement in technology in seeds, you're constantly fighting the benchmark. Okay, you're able to produce 10 tons of wheat per acre. You want to go to 10 and 10.1, 10.2, 10.5 tons, and you have to keep adjusting for different agroclimatic conditions. So all the technology is now around climate change. How are you going to have your wheat or your corn growing in an environment which is so unpredictable, and you have such high temperatures? Normally, plants are bred so specific, and with such an impact on climate change, we have to create a much more broader resilience in the seeds to be able to give really the farmer's predictability, right? If you look at what UPL does, we are focused on farmers. We want to give predictability to farmers. We want to get we believe that the farmer is the center of our universe, and everything we're doing going forward in our research pipeline is to create more resilience in farmers. So the more predictability, technologies for to mitigate these really hot spells, these really long dry spells, these really wet spells. And if you don't breed your seeds right, if you don't have the right technology, farmers do not have any margin to be able to cope with the risk they take.
Jay, do you have any idea how many farmers use your products?
Oh my God! So statistically, we would at least 7 out of 10 farmers in the world would use at least one of our products.
And how many farmers are there in the world?
Oh my God! So I say a billion, just because dependence and
Yeah.
actual farmers. So
Sure.
if, for example, in India there are 400 million people dependent directly on agriculture farming,
Right.
right? If you look at Africa, it's a huge number. If you look at Southeast Asia, but in the US, it's commercial farmers 50,000. In Australia,
Yeah.
20 something thousand, and Brazil, it's a little bit larger.
So I read your most recent annual report, and you have you're a public company, right? Your stocks
That's
trade on the Mumbai Exchange, right? So you've got to be financially motivated. You've got to return. And I've watched some of this CNBC India. People talk about your return, your earnings and things like that. It's been interesting to watch. But you also, in your most recent annual report, set in your 5-year non-financial goals around things like reducing environmental footprint, enhance food security, enhance sustainable sourcing, and strengthen community well-being. These are non-financial. In fact, one might argue that they're actually anti-financial to the extent that they are socially sensitive, but not necessarily driving money to the bottom line. Why do you set these types of goals? And this is one of the reasons I think that UPL has gotten so much attention, is because you really have become a socially conscious in all these different ways company.
I'll just go back a little bit, and being a family run business, we always, my family, even the greater family, does a lot of social work, and we've always believed in that. And my mother spends a lot of time committing, and my father does too. And it's very difficult for them to say no to a good cause, because when you live in India and you see, it's just no way the government is expected. We do not expect the government to be able to execute any of these things. So as a family, we've always done a lot of charity. We fix an annual charity budget, and it's finished within the first quarter, right? And then there's always this debate, how much more money can we get? And we've already overcommitted and everything. So that's been a tradition with the family. What we've done is now put a framework in place where we say, we want to make an impact, right? While we did always focus on impact on communities, on social projects, the need-based projects. Today, we encourage all our people to follow that same philosophy in every country, right? If we are in Colombia, if there is the COVID, they need to, each leadership team has to get involved in community projects. And, we believe that really creates a huge benefit for us. And I don't think it's financially, it is definitely motivates people. It definitely helps you retain talent, because people really appreciate that. We have found that while we do invest substantial, much more than we were rated the second most charitable company in India, I think a year ago or so. And because we've never shied away from it, we feel it's our duty within India and around the world to really do something. And it is small amounts of money which make a huge impact. So in every country where we have our operations, have an office, each manager there is encouraged to take his team and do some social investing, right? And to enable more than do a single a project, is enable a much larger impact through our projects. So that's been part of our DNA throughout, and we can't do it any other way. As far as what we are doing today is that we, when you come from India and you are involved in agriculture, and then you see the impact of a drought, impact of um, um, uh, you know floods, or supply chain
But the
disruptions
monsoon,
for
for example,
farmers.
the monsoon season is very important in India. You get a good monsoon, your stock goes up. You get a bad monsoon, your stock goes down. I mean, we don't think that way in this part of the world, but monsoons are given, and yet the quality or the type of monsoon you have, it can be very impactful on food.
That's right. So for example, this year we had an early monsoon because there was some cyclonic activity, and then you had 40 days of dry weather. The soybean farmers lost at least 60% of their yield. Now it's rain, and now it's flooding. So you had early rains, so they planted their seed. You had 40 days of no rain, so they lost most of their yield. Then you had a flood, so they said wipe out, right? So and there's no capacity. They don't have the capacity to be resilient. They don't have a saving. They don't have any room. And so what we are investing, and we did it prior to the excitement around sustainability, right? We said, if you cannot build resilience for the farmer using technology, is useless, right? Because if you cannot give him a window, if you can't develop technology that when there is a dry spell, his survival rate goes up. If you do not have technology to improve the water holding capacity of the soil, all these things will eventually lead to a disaster. And the biggest challenge for us today is that if you have a food delivery guy in a city making more money than a 5-acre farmer, which is a big farmer, by the way. In India, a 5-acre farmer is considered fairly rich in his village. Uh, it's a disaster. You're not going to be able to uh, cope with the growth in the demand for food, because why should a farmer hope for his son to become a farmer if he can make more money delivering food in a city? And why should he? He's not going to encourage him, and the risks which he takes is enormous. So it's a big challenge, and that's where we are absolutely focused on developing technologies to create more resilience in the food system.
UPL has committed itself to, and George mentioned there's something, a phrase called OpenAg. What is OpenAg? What does it mean, and how important is it? And who else is pursuing the same strategy?
So OpenAg is a really how we think, and it is an approach to open collaboration. What is happening in the world is today there's huge consolidation in the industry. So if you look at the top 10 companies, 80% of the inputs industry is controlled by 10 less than 10 people, and naturally that reduces innovation. The investment in agriculture technology is increasing dramatically. There's a lot of universities, a lot of startups, a lot of technology which comes from pharmaceutical industry. There's a lot of interlink in there. But the people working on these technologies do not have access to farms, to understanding the challenges being faced by agriculture. So UPL has an open ag approach. We believe in a complete open platform, a collaborative platform to solve some of the challenges in agriculture. And today, since we announced our Open Ag Center in North Carolina, we have 70 ongoing projects and probably 100 more lined up to get signed off, where we actually incubate different technologies, in partner with companies testing different technologies, bring it to market. We have an open ag farm in Brazil, which is 30,000 acres, 30,000 hectares, sorry, where we test out on a large scale technologies of startup companies, because there's no way a startup company with 5 people, 10 people are going to be able to bring that to life on their own. So with an open ag platform, which is really an open collaborative platform where we work with everybody and to really find solutions in agriculture.
That's extremely interesting. You said one of those places is in North Carolina. You're doing similar in Brazil, other places around the world as well?
That's right. So we have a whole uh, uh, you know bunch of technology development centers where we have commercial trials going on different technologies, and we can take it much faster. So we work with the startup companies, with universities, to test out their technology, so they don't they just don't get stuck in academics. They sort of take it to market much faster than they would be able to do it on their own.
So may I ask a question? I have one of the questions, the first question that came through. You mentioned as part of this whole conversation around technology, technological development, you said there's great talent in the US, and I presume that's why the A&M work is going on, what's going on in North Carolina. And may I ask the question, can you develop better talent in India, for example, or maybe in China, or maybe in Brazil? I guess maybe you're answering that question a little bit, but is agricultural technology the talent that you need to develop these new technologies concentrated in certain places, or is it getting more broadly dispersed across the world?
So I think there are centers of excellence for all technology. Now, if you look at what Brazil does in agriculture, it's amazing, right? They talk about farms of 100,000 hectares. There's nobody who can develop technology for farms at that size. Then you look at what happens in Chile. They're just amazing at growing fruits. They're so intense, so involved and they develop amazing talent there. California is also great because they're really advanced. What we do at Texas A&M is biotech, right? Understanding genetics of plants, understanding the function of all the genes, and there's the US is so far ahead on that. And two reasons. One is the freedom to operate, right? You do not have a regulatory environment which is, I would say, draconian. In India, for example, if you do work on that, the law is just not conducive to doing disruptive research. Market in India exists, China exists, and US it exists, but the regulatory environment within the university system is so free that it actually allows people to grow much faster and for us to develop much faster and get talent.
So before we get on to the future, because we're moving through time here, I want to ask a question that's very, very timely. How has COVID impacted the food industry and specifically UPL? What are the things that we should know about in terms of COVID's impact on global agriculture?
It was very interesting. About February, March, April last year, the whole industry was in panic because we couldn't understand. We weren't sure how the governments around the world are going to react, whether they understand, because it's planting season, right? It's just before the planting season. So all the supply chain is running. Everything has to be in place. The farmer needs to plant his seed. He needs to, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, it's critical period. And we were panicking. We were talking to all the governments around the world. And it was actually quite surreal for us to see how supportive the governments were. In the peak of the crisis in Italy, our teams were given special permits. Our trucks were given special permits. They realized that the food security is, you don't want a medical crisis. You don't want to become a food crisis. So we were very surprised how agile all the governments were once it came to this discussion. Even in almost every country, in India, they we had few meetings with the government. They completely understood what we were saying. The state governments, everybody understood. They had some meetings, and they allowed us free operation, because you can imagine, if you miss the planting window, you're not going to get any food, and that could have been a disaster. So we were very pleased with the efficiency of all the governments when push came to shove, and they operated very well. So for us, we obviously, being, as you said, financially a focused company, we had to decide what crops would disappear, because if you're not going to be able to run textile mills, cotton is not going to be important, right? People are just going to focus on food, and then you had labor shortages, because the migratory labor in different parts of the world weren't available for plucking fruits or doing any kind of farm labor. And so a lot of challenges, but all of them sort of overcame, and we were able to actually do very well. And for UPL, it was even bigger challenge, because we just acquired a large company, and we just finished the integration, at least the first stage of integration, and we were in the second stage of integration of this business. So it was even challenging. We doubled the size of our business a year before COVID. So it was some scary moments there.
Certainly in the US, we saw the consumption patterns for food were completely different, right? As restaurants shut down, you had that sort of supply chain completely different than the way in which food had either been prepared or consumed in the United States. And it created quite a disruption here. And you saw a real change in at least where food ended up going, the types of food that were being consumed and things like that. I presume that was a global event as well.
Absolutely. And you had farmers calling us and saying, can you please do something? We have so much tomato here, it's going to rot. We have this fruits lying here, we need to find, and shipping rates went out of control, and logistics was really out of control. So, a lot of, we were on calls 24/7, figuring out what's going to happen, how it's going to impact our business, how it's going to impact generally the whole food system. Yeah.
So very quickly, Jay, we got a couple of seconds before we get to the future, which is going to be a very important segment. But I just want to say, I saw a video of you talking about how UPL was providing gas to the oxygen to the hospitals in India. Can you just explain this? This is another community service that UPL provided to, and we all know how difficult COVID has been in the domestic population in India. Our sincere thoughts with everybody in India, how difficult this has been for your country. But talk about that little experience.
Yeah, so I'll talk about that. In February, I met a friend of mine who makes vaccines in India, and he told me he had 60 million doses and nobody wanted to be vaccinated in India. And he's saying, I don't know what to do. I do not have permission to export, and I have so many doses, and it's going to expire. And I need to, and he was talking to the government. So I said, okay, we operate in so many countries. Let's start dialogues with the government and the Indian embassy and see if we can, send out the vaccines. Obviously, regulatory approvals, all those requirements were there. And the Indian government said, okay, April 1st, we'll let you, we'll give you whatever allocation you want. Don't worry about it. And obviously, we know what happened between February and April. It was a disaster. Everything exploded in India. So it was completely unexpected. Nobody expected the first wave in 2000. India did very well. We had almost not a single hospital completely full. Everything was full. It was a disaster. In the middle of this, all chemical companies need nitrogen as a blanket to avoid any kind of oxygen in coming in contact with the chemicals. So we use nitrogen as a basically inert medium to blanket. And one of our engineers said, we have 15 nitrogen plants. And why don't we convert it into oxygen plant? And it was we said, okay, how long will it take? And you actually just have to change the molecular sieve, and there's a little bit of work to be done, but it had not been done before. So you could actually, air is whatever, 15, 18% oxygen, the rest is nitrogen. Uh, so we were able to switch the machine which made nitrogen to make oxygen. And we quickly talked to the government, to the Prime Minister's office, and said, listen, we have one plant, we have 15 plants which we are going to convert and going to supply to. Unless you want us to divert it to the right to any other specific place, we'll be able to, in our region, all the hospitals, we can start giving them some of these plants, because normally hospitals buy oxygen in cylinders. These are plants which you go and park there and continuously producing oxygen. And there was shortage of oxygen cylinders. It was a crisis, and it was amazing what our team did. It was absolute innovation on the fly, and the engineers really worked day and night. We actually had maybe 40 seminars with other companies who also could convert their plants. So we trained another, I would say 70 to 80 companies, with another probably 5 to 10, so another 500 oxygen plants were delivered to different hospitals. They were even a potato chip company can actually has a nitrogen plant. So you could just imagine what that did. It actually just created that extra availability of oxygen, and we were very proud of what our team did there. And we've supplied so many of them.
And I know you did all that for free, so congratulations.
Yes.
And I'm sure everybody appreciated it. So let's get to the future quickly here, because we've got about 15 or so minutes to go, a little bit more. As of yesterday, I looked on the web. There's 7.875 billion people in the United States, in the world, 7.875 billion people in the world. 36% of which live in India and China combined. So, I mean, over a third of the whole globe lives in India and China. The UN projects that there'll be 9.8 billion people by 2050. And those numbers are disputable. But anyways, that's a 25% increase potentially in 30 years. Let's talk about the future of food and the capacity. I mean, we all know that Malthus projected on this in the 1800s, whether or not we would someday run out of food. What are the most important threats that we need to worry about to food security, food sustainability? We talked earlier about the difference between organic food and sustainable agriculture. What are the issues here that we need to be thinking about as general citizens of the world?
One of the biggest challenges for a farmer is around with climate change, right? You're getting hugely impacted by climate change. You're getting hugely impacted by all the other impacts of impacting agriculture. Now, you need to produce more. We need to conserve land. One of the biggest challenges for us, and everybody acknowledges it, right? We need to conserve as much forest land as possible. We need to conserve the Amazon. We need to conserve the equivalents of Amazon in every country, in every part of the world. On the other hand, we need to produce more food. We need to increase productivity. We need to reduce the amount of resources being used in food. We are overusing fertilizer in some parts of the world. We are wasting fertilizer in the world. How do you optimize the productivity of agriculture? And my biggest challenge, or UPL, what we are trying to do is how much can we focus on reducing the cost for the farmer? How much can we increase the productivity? And what are the technologies needed to fight things like dry spell, a very heavy wet spell? And because farmers do not have enough money to buy a second season. If a smallholder farmer in Africa or in India or in Vietnam or in Indonesia or anywhere, has a setback, he's done. He is done. So what we feel is that we need to reduce the resources used by the farmer, make it more productive, make his farmland more productive, and reduce his cost and increase his productivity. And what we have moved away from as a company, we are focusing on outcome. We tell a farmer, we are not here to sell you a product, we are selling you an outcome. What is an outcome? 30% reduction in your cost and 30% increase in your yield. And this is the only way. And what do you offer him? We offer him, okay, if he is spending $100 an acre, $200 an acre, and he has a dry spell, what are the technologies we can bring in to actually enable him to survive, to increase the what you call is the germination of his crop or survival of his crop. Typically when you have a 30-40 day dry spell, you would lose 30-40% of your yield. So even after that, he has perfect weather, he's only going to get 60% of his output. So what are the technologies which we need to invest in? What are the whole space is bursting with ideas around technology to create more and more resilience of crops, and so this is my biggest worry, is that people think organic farming is sustainable. It is not. Organic farming actually gives you 30 to 40% lesser yields. It's like saying the whole world will survive without the vaccine. No, we need to be vaccinated, right? You need technology to be able to produce more food, because if we have 9.8, 10 billion, 8 billion, whatever people, and people are going to get richer, they're going to eat more, we're going to actually have a disproportionate amount of food requirement as the GDP of the world improves and of the poor countries improve. So we really need to focus on productivity of food and reduce the amount of fertilizer we use, optimize precision agriculture, use biostimulants. We have technology, we are developing technology which can actually help the plant survive heat stress, right? In Sicily, it was 48 degrees. In Turkey, it was 50 degrees. In Canada, it was. What are the technology? How can you help the plants survive these difficult periods, which they're not really designed for? So you need to add stimulants. We can actually, there is technology where we can now shut down the operations of a plant during the heat stress, so they increase their survival rate. And there's so much technology in so many areas, which is going to really be where we've not invested in the past. The industry hasn't invested, farmers haven't invested, universities haven't investigated. So I think all that is going to come up and is going to help us fight some of these challenges.
So this gets into questions like aquaculture and vertical farming and other types of, instead of thinking about acres, thinking about tall buildings as farms in the future. Is that a way to improve some of these issues in terms of resources, needing more land, needing other resources?
It's these are some of the very great super ideas which are being developed and tested. Some of the crops will be able to be grown in those environments, not all, for sure. Different areas of the world will use different technologies to be able to do that. But when you think about growing vegetables in a city, in a garage, in close to a city, just think about the investment gone into the water supply, right? You have clean water coming, you're using drinking water almost to grow. If you depreciate all the investment required for all that, it's unviable, right? It is completely unviable. So I think some of these technologies, some of the crops will be able to grow in the environment, but conventional agriculture is still going to be the mainstay for most crops.
So one of the things, I was at a conference recently, I said to you earlier, and I learned that to grow one almond takes 1.5 gallons of water. And one of the things that we're moving away from is away from dairy products to other forms of milk. And so people are using almond milk. I'm sure a lot of people who are listening use almond milk, but it was a startling fact to me, the amount of water it takes to grow one almond. And then you just do the math and figure out how many almonds it takes to put into a glass of almond milk. You start to figure out how much water you're actually consuming. And this is sort of the resource conservation that you're talking about, I think.
Absolutely. And we have developed technology which is starch-based technology to actually store water in the first 6-8 inches of the soil. And these sort of technologies which uh, were sort of not valued prior to where when you start rewarding farmers for sustainability, and if you have the track and trace, where if you can call, if a farmer is able to reduce the water used on the farm, and can demonstrate that, and that food is called sustainable. If I say I was going to use 100 kilos of fertilizer, and we know that 40% of the urea applied, nitrogen applied in soil is lost. We know that. But can you develop technology to use only exactly what you want, or just a little bit more? Can you actually use technology to reduce water on the almond? Can you go from uh, have a 30-40% reduction in water, because a lot of it is lost to evaporation, right?
Right.
And so if you need 1 gallon of water, you actually apply 5 gallons, because it's 40 degrees in California. You're not going to be able to keep it there. So there are technologies being developed and commercialized as we speak, which can reduce dramatically. For example, we reduce water requirement in sugarcane by 30%. We can reduce water in potato growing by almost 40 to 50%, and get actually better yields, because when you apply excess water, you apply it today, and then you wait a week and you apply it again, or 2 weeks and you apply it again. It cannot be used by the plant. The plant needs a steady supply. It needs to eat every day. It needs to have photosynthesis every day. So you need to have technologies which uh, which which enable that, and actually increases the productivity dramatically, we've seen. So a lot of those technologies are being developed today, and I think that it would, once you start rewarding farmers, and this is what we believe strongly, I believe strongly, is that if you want to enable 1 billion farmers to be more sustainable, you need to reward them, you need to recognize them. And if you reward and recognize them, you will see a dramatic change. And when you talk about water, fertilizer, carbon, all these type of things, we are incentivizing clean energy, we are incentivizing EV, we are incentivizing all these things. Why aren't we rewarding farmers for better behavior?
So I know your organization and you personally have been very involved in various partnerships, collaborative organizations. One that I focused on for a second was the World Economic Forum's Grow Asia and Grow Africa. Can you explain what those types of partnerships are doing? Again, looking into the future about how they're trying to ensure that food is available, food is sustainable, and farmers can survive.
Absolutely. And the biggest challenge, as I probably mentioned earlier, is that the resilience of farmers, right? Farmers do not have the appetite to take shocks. They do not, they spend all their money on their farm. Now, I'm talking about smallholder farmers. Bigger farmers have other resources, so they have a little more resilience. But when you look at the value, disproportionate value, right? If you look at what a farmer gets for his crop, and what the losses and the value chain losses, and what you buy at, is a huge difference, right? So what we are working on in all these kind of organization is really an approach where we have a whole value chain discussion. So if we're talking to a coffee company, if we're talking to a coffee grower, we talk about a value chain. So we talk to all the players, and the whole discussion is around, well, if you want coffee to be more sustainable, you have to start with the guys who are the last guy in the chain, and if he incentivizes the right behavior, you will see a huge impact on how coffee is grown, what cover crops he can grow. Can he actually sequester more carbon than he's generating on his farm? Because the only way, I believe, and one of the most important ways to enable the farmers, the farming community, if we can incentivize the agriculture, the food system to be more sustainable in terms of carbon sequestering, you will see a much faster impact than any of the other platforms being used today to actually reduce carbon from the environment. And we need to reward farmers for better behavior.
So Isabella asked the question as we're coming to the close here, what agreements and advancements in agricultural discussions are you hoping for in this year's Glasgow Climate Change Conference? Do you think that there are, in fact, conversations around specific agreements, specific advancements that climate change, the people in these climate change conversations are actually taking seriously?
No, I think the run up to the COP26 is really exciting. We are all so busy giving our feedback, inputs on so many topics. And there are so many countries, organizations working on it. So it's a very exciting time, and I'm sure that from my point of view, I truly believe that we need to. The world needs to be decarbonized. There's no question, right? And we need to use agriculture as a means of decarbonization. So, if we can, and all the companies in the world are promising to be zero carbon or carbon neutral in the next 15 years. And I think that we need to actually value the carbon and the behavior of farmers. And if we start value and rewarding them, you'll see a dramatic change. And I think 30% of the decarbonization of the world can happen just through reward and recognition of the food systems. And I think that is much more sustainable than any other discussions right now.
Well, thank you. Jay, this has been an extraordinary hour. I could not have been more excited to start on this journey with you, and I've learned a great deal through this. On behalf of the Asia Society in Houston, the Asia Society in India, and the Harvard Business School Club, we want to thank you. I just wondered if you had any closing comments, any closing remarks. This is a very thoughtful audience, very impactful audience, people that can have influence on the people that you think are going to help make the right decisions going forward. Is there any closing comments you'd like to leave with our group?
I think understanding sustainability in agriculture is very important. It's a subject which is very easy to understand, but there's a lot of misinformation. We need to increase productivity in agriculture. We need to conserve forests. We need to feed everyone. And these are challenges which are solvable. And we need to reduce the amount of resources being used, water being used, other things being used. And I think technology is going to be available because the investments are coming. Everybody's investing in this area, and it's going to be a very exciting time where we actually recognize food not only for feeding, but also to decarbonize the world.
Well, thank you. Great closing remarks. I want to thank you. Of course, I want to thank our audience as well. Everyone who dialed in, George, I want to thank you for helping us organize this this conversation. And I want to wish everybody a great day, evening, nighttime, wherever you are listening in. We appreciate your participation, and we look forward to our next conversation. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.